Hope well finds message. You finds message. This message. I well you finds you. I hope well hope message. This I you this well finds you hope you this I well.
Hello, welcome to another episode of I Hope This Message Finds You Well. I am Eloise Sweetman, and with me is my friend and colleague Kris Dittel. Today we share an interview we did with cultural worker Lara Khaldi in April 2021. Besides being a member of the curatorial team of Documenta 15, Lara has curated numerous projects and symposia in Palestine and abroad, including the School of Intrusions educational platform with Noor Abed and Overtone on the Politics of Listening exhibition and symposium at Goethe Institute, both in Ramallah. Until recently, she was head of the Media Studies program at Bard al-Quds College in Jerusalem.
I hope this message finds you well.
I thought I would just introduce you as someone who is a dear friend of mine, whom I met 7-8 years ago when we were both participants of the Appel curatorial program, which at the time, I don't know how it is now, but at the time it was very intense, kind of physically, mentally, really, really intense. So when you go through this program with a small group of people, you really, really get to know them really well. I can say we were really lucky enough because I got a lot of friends out of this group, actually all of the participants, and Lara is one of the people who I would think about when I'm thinking about having some kind of, issue with how to respond as a curator to something, or even when I don't really have an answer to a question, I would think, what would Lara do? Nice. What would Lara say? So you're within this group of my, mental, imaginary support of people. And Lara is a curator and cultural worker from Ramallah in Palestine. Welcome, Lara.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, welcome. So, I don't know, where should we begin? Should we begin with the first very basic question, which is, what led you to become a curator, actually?
So I studied archaeology and art history for my undergrad. And soon after, or while studying, I really liked archaeology. So working with objects, looking at them, cleaning them in the archaeology lab, hours and hours of cleaning. But I never liked the digs, which looking back now, I think if I were at this age and going on digs, it would be much more fun. But at the time, I was too impatient because I wanted to get to the interpretation part. So I really liked art history. I did a minor of literature. I loved literature. And so I think I was kind of into abstract knowledge more, but related to objects. I don't know if this makes sense somehow. But yeah, this is I guess, the very beginning. But I knew nothing about curating then, of course. This is the beginning of the 2000s. My God, we've become so old. And so I guess the Appel was actually as a program where I later went with Kris, was just starting then. So actually, no one was even talking about curatorial studies. I mean, of course, there were curators, but I wasn't familiar with any of them. Anyway, after I graduated, I went back home and everyone into Palestine, and everyone was pressuring me, of course, parents and family, to get a job. And so I was walking one day in the old city of Jerusalem with my sister, and I saw this sign that said Al-Ma'mal Contemporary Art Foundation. And I thought, contemporary art, this sounds like something that, I'm kind of interested in. I'm going to go into, actually my sister encouraged me to just go in and introduce myself and ask if they were looking for, an intern or something. And then I did that. And that was really the beginning of it, where I got to understand what a curator is, What's actually amazing is that none of the people that were working there were professional, like in the terms that we think of now as kind of professional curators, right? They were. One of them was an artist, Jumana Emil Aboud, whom I later on collaborated a lot with. And the other was a kind of self-made curator, self-taught curator, Jack Persekian. But then I learned a lot from them and from working in Palestine for a couple of years, before I went to Sharjah Art Foundation. And I worked on several biennials. And I worked really from production, like from the perspective of production. I was an artist, like my actual real job, paid salary, right? Like, was an artist coordinator. I loved that job. So it was to work with artists during the biennial, and I stayed on for 2 biennials afterwards. So I did 3 Sharjah biennials, and I worked on publications. I worked with artists. I worked on programs, and I was always working from this kind of production perspective. And the curators always seemed to be too snobbish and too kind of abstract, and it was them who spoke about things, and we did all the work. So it was a very kind of tense relationship with the curators. I always think that it was also a kind of this, how in the early years also the models, there was this one model of the curator that at least I was exposed to. Yeah, I don't know about you, but it was this kind of model of the curator who's highly intellectual, does the art theory jargon talk, and decides on things, but doesn't get their hands dirty. And so somewhat, of course, in during your 20s, you look up to that, but at the same time you have you resent it, right? At the same time. But then, eventually you become that at some point, but then you resent it. I think, but you realize, and it's late, I don't know. I'm also a person who slowly realizes things, or I'm a slow learner, I think. But it took some time to kind of understand what kind of a curator that I want to be, or I am, or I can be, So yeah, a long answer to your...
No, I think it's exactly the answer that we wanted. And I think I relate to that, to the feeling of being a slow learner. I feel like in my own practice, I only, in the last kind of 2 years, have really come to terms with what I want curating to be for me.
Yeah, I also feel like maybe during the Appel, it feels like curating as an image, what we see is already outdated. So then you have to figure out where you are and where you want to go. Because I even feel like during the Appel, what we learned was this kind of neoliberal jet set curatorial model, or that was the kind of position we were kind of shown, and traveling from one big art event to another, constantly busy, constantly on the run. And then I feel like, then also like you position yourself towards that image and where do I want to go? And in some ways it's this kind of model is also changing and seeing how that image of the curator is being outdated continuously. Or I like to think.
Yeah.
No, exactly. The Appel was a kind of a big part of also thinking about curating, but it was also kind of perpetuating a model of the curator, of the jet set curator. Because after Sharjah, I went back home to Ramallah, and I became the artistic director of Sakakini Cultural Center, Sakakini Cultural Center, and about a year and a half after, it was very challenging as a position, extremely challenging. And I thought, this is where I'm going to become a curator.
Yeah.
And it kind of didn't work because the reality was so difficult and challenging. And so I thought that the solution for it would be to go to the Appel and find out what curating is. And again, it was about a particular model of what a curator is. But the experience was extremely rich because it was peer learning, basically. Learning from Kris and Kate and Renata and Aneta and Emma what actually curating is for them also, what it means in different ways, and going through the experience together. Also being able to kind of reflect and think, and this is, I think, where also you start to doubt as well the very model that the Appel perpetuates. So it's kind of a double-edged curatorial program.
But I think it makes sense that in one's development, you start to question the institution that you're learning from. Like, I think it shows that one has kind of progressed. I think if, don't you agree? Like, if you kind of just say, okay, this is it and move on, then perhaps you've not learnt as much as you could have. So I think it's important to push against and question these institutions. But you're looking at a question, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm looking. We have a little list of questions we want to ask most of our guests. And we were just wondering, what's your favorite part in your curating? Because when you spoke, it sounds like you really come from this relationship with artists and also overseeing the whole production process and being there throughout this thinking process also of the artist, but then also to the outside world, as meaning audience and others. So I was wondering, what is your favorite part in curating, or how you position yourself? Because during our discussions with Eloise, we also realized we have a different approach actually, and what is our most cherished part when we engaged with art or artists.
What's your most cherished part?
I'm
curious to hear.
Oh my God. I'm very artist-focused curator, I just realized. I also I love objects, but for me, this kind of context and having a kind of really good relationship with artists is really important.
I'm more of the being left alone with the object. So I really love making shows with existing works and not so much working. I mean, I'm learning more on the producing new work and that relationship, so I can see where Kris is coming from. But I really love the time of being with an artwork, particularly after the show is installed. And I think it's quite we don't, as curators, often have the chance to have an extended time. So I try to hold on to that as much as possible. But yeah, so I would say we had a term for it. Object-focused curating.
Object-oriented curating.
Yes, object-orientated curating. Yeah.
OOC.
Yeah.
Coined it now.
Yes, this is exactly. So yeah, and what about you?
I think I'm an artist-oriented curator.
Yeah.
if we're kind of using terminology. I love working with artists closely. So I think for me the fun part is I have to say, of course, you find out every exhibition what is because in different projects you have also favorite kind of parts. But I think that I really like working closely with artists and working again with the same artists to get to know them better, and then it becomes more of a collaboration than it is an artist-curator relationship, because this is, this is for me also an issue, this curator-artist relationship, right? It's always looked upon and seen as a power relationship, right? There's a particular dynamic where the curator is the one or the authority on decisions, right? I mean, they're given the upper hand usually, or they're thought of as to have the upper hand. But I've worked with artists that are much older and much more experienced than I am, and in a sense, they're the one I learned from them how to build an exhibition rather than the other way around. So it's also these different relationships that you develop with artists, and also learning that as a curator that it's important as well to, sometimes it's even more challenging not to be the curator in a working relationship on an exhibition than to be the curator, right? Because it's also this pressure from the art world and pressure from the institution for you to be authoritative in terms of how to build the exhibition or what to do. And actually, I have to say, most of the time, the artist is more creative than the curator. So you kind of, so it's taken me, it takes you a long time to realize this as well, that it's a collaborative relationship and that it's about making the project rather than definition of roles, and that it's really a collaborative process. I have to say that maybe like thinking about the favorite parts and not so favorite parts, it's the working with the institution, the negotiation with the institution. Is then quite difficult for me. But working with artists is the most fascinating and favorite part for me. Also building the exhibition, I love production time when it's not a complicated. When it's not complicated by the institution. So in Palestine, you build there isn't this kind of sacredness around the artwork. So you bring the artworks, you kind of improvise during building, right? You don't have to have a pre-plan. You come there with the artists and you kind of work together in the space and you turn the exhibition around. It's not, that you have to kind of have a floor plan before time, making complicated and complex theoretical, intellectual relationships between the objects in the space and, building the whole thing. And then it's built immaculately. And I love, the part where you're working in the space with the artists, or of course, maybe not, it's a lot of the work I do is also not exhibitions, but other things like books and going to the printers, and this is exciting for me also, the production.
I feel like that's where the curating is often, like in the space with the artist and the object, and where the real decisions and the feeling and the atmosphere is being built. It does it's not beforehand. No. That is my favorite part of curating too, is being in the room.
What's your least favorite part?
There are many. Funding applications.
Oh yeah, mine's transport.
Oh, transport.
I hate transport. Yeah. But I think for me, I'm very lucky because I don't have to worry so much about other institutions, because I run a small exhibition space here in Rotterdam. So I am sometimes I don't have to fight against anything. But this is also something that we really talk about a lot, is about the issue of the institution. And for both of us, we really see ourselves as freelancers. We were wondering how do you see yourself now, because in your bio you call yourself a cultural worker, and I know that's a question you wanted to ask.
Yeah, we were wondering about that, if there was a hesitance to call yourself a curator, or you see cultural worker as something that embody more of these roles you have as an educator, also as an editor, as a writer, and so on.
Yes, I mean, this is this whole also debate around the freelance curator, no? Is this... it's cultural worker is, more open, right? In terms of not defining what you do, but it's also about a particular position or positionality, to position ourselves kind of within a workforce as well, in a sense. And that it's extreme. It's not something that is elevated as well, no? I guess, in a sense. I find it, just simply more encompassing than, the term curator. It could be more open, right?
For sure.
Because we are kind of also flexible. We do different things. You saw this meme that's going around. I thought you would like it, because the curator, editor, teacher, podcast host.
I've never been so seen before in my life. It's like they knew me.
It's how we adapt quickly to different roles. Yeah. So it's kind of catching up with our changing roles.
Changing roles and circumstances. I don't know, maybe we shouldn't be talking so much about pandemic because I think everybody's so tired of that. But how are you coping? How the pandemic has influenced like your working methods, or like how was your experience of the past year, especially also that you are a young mother. So how would that so-called work-life balance played out for you in this time?
I'm a mother, but I'm not young. I'm a new mother. I wish I was a young mother.
I consider you young.
After having a baby in your mid-30s, you're like, why didn't I have a baby in my mid-20s? I would have, it's the sleep deprivation is, it has much more impact, I guess, when you're older. It has been challenging. Definitely challenging, with COVID more challenging, and with Documenta 15 another layer of challenging. So we have been on Zoom since about a year and a half, a year exactly, since the pandemic has started. So that's been really exhausting because it's a very collective process with Ruan Grupa and other artistic team members and Lumbung members and artists. It's a process which requires many conversations and assemblies, which we call majlises. And so I've been on Zoom for a whole year, from morning till evening. And it's been, extremely challenging and exhausting. But the process has been extremely, extremely enriching. And that's why I can't complain. But in terms of being a parent in these times, it's extremely difficult because the nurseries were closed for a long time. Thankfully, my partner was more available to spend more time caring for Neil, but it's in many ways it's much more challenging than before, than not being a parent. I now realize so many things. You don't have the same time. You're caring for someone else's life. It's you can't put it aside. You also realize how the art world is completely is the infrastructure of the art scene is absolutely not adaptable even for artists and curators with families. The assumption is that you don't have a family, you don't have a child to care for, and it's really surprising, right? Because we think of ourselves as very progressive,
very inclusive,
blah blah blah. Right? But then when it comes to that, unfortunately, so it's really been eye-opening, and I think I would definitely like to do more towards that, to also work more with that, because I think it's not, of course, it's not only with parents, it's with anyone who's taking care of another person, right? We talk about care, we read a lot of theory about care, but then, we all know it. So it's important to also be able to find ways to practice this, to find ways to, help each other. I don't know how, but institutions, again, they are built for, singular artists and curators and cultural workers, as if they come completely alone. It's a kind of package. How do we change that? I don't know if we should even expect that to change. I think a lot of people have been trying for a long time, and it's, you're treated always as an exception and as a favor to you, and I think that something else needs to happen outside of the institution, maybe a kind of network of support. it's definitely been challenging, impossible in some moments even. But again, but actually, speaking about working with Documenta and Ruan Grupa, it's actually been, I think, maybe in another situation it would have been even more difficult, because what's amazing about it is that when you are working collectively, because you're not the only one working on certain aspects, right? We have working groups, we divide ourselves in always, even when dividing ourselves, we divide ourselves into groups. So there's always someone who covers for you, right? When you have to be away to take care of the child. So it's kind of built in a way, right? Like being part of a collective, you're also working in a way where when some members are absent, others continue and cover for you and are able to. And the work is divided in certain ways that it holds itself. Like other members hold, the project, the work also on your behalf, which is great. I think I've learned a lot from that.
But I've been thinking also about how this idea of the curator as this persona who is like a single or individual, always ready, always flexible, always powerful, is kind of, it seems to me as if disintegrating, or, there are more collectives being formed, or at least I like to think that there is more and more acknowledgement of also other people who make that kind of labor or representation possible, who are the producers, the artists, who are the team around you, or even teaming up then as a collective. And I don't know if it's just my perception, but it seems to me that, of course, there are more and more larger projects that are being curated by collectives, but also I feel like there are different kind of working groups and collectives being formed that I think it speaks to some kind of urgency also in that regard, that, we are not an island.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very much expanding also, the field of curating and what curating is and who the curator is. So the singular curator is expanding into multiples, and also the persona, so how to also kind of demystify, because we all know that an exhibition, but not only these different projects and artist projects are all built and made not only by the curator, but by a community of people.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
Working in different ways, and every way is as valuable as, I think, the input of the curator, right? So it becomes extremely problematic if it's not acknowledged.
Yeah.
Then this means there's a hierarchy, there's a cultural capital, and mostly it's cultural capital, because there is
no other capital.
The money is cultural capital goes to a curator usually, but it's many more people that are contributing in equally valuable ways.
Definitely.
So I think it's extremely important that it's not other. I mean, I also don't see much difference between an artist and a curator. I think maybe the difference is that, or maybe freelance curators and artists, because institutional curators are maybe different. Maybe we shouldn't call them, I don't know if it's a question of terminology, but curators who work in large public institutions that have issues with racism and hierarchy and inequalities are also different than independent freelance curators who are struggling, who make exhibitions for free or work with communities and grassroots and on grassroots projects, right? I mean, just like artists are different, right? There are market artists and and artist collectives, and I think it's the same with curators, and you don't realize until late, right? So there's also a kind of always an attack on the curator, but I think it's a certain persona of the curator, this one, that Kris kind of mentioned, but maybe artists, it's important that artists curate, because then they kind of bring out these, right, to the these issues, maybe to the surface. This important discussion about what curating is as well.
Definitely. I think that maybe I've said this to Kris many times, but the curators that I most admire are usually, first of all, artists. And in fact, the person that we will interview after you is both an artist and a curator called Joey Tang. And there's a certain engagement with material that I feel that I lack as a curator, and that or there's an access to material that I feel like I don't have because I do not work, with, concrete or glass every day. And so there is that tactility, but also certain that, it's a touch, and I love witnessing that, and like kind of like how can I access that as well? But my curating will always be limited. But that's okay, I think. I don't mind. There's other ways of making a good exhibition. But I also want to just quickly say, I remember once when I organised a really big event in Den Haag a few years ago. It was massive. It was a huge symposium over a number of days, and there was an exhibition, la la la. And I just before it began, I was sweeping sawdust. It was in a church, out of away from the altar, because everybody was going to. And somebody came up to me at the end of the symposium and didn't say, good work. They said, don't ever clean before in front of the audience. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I find it as an audience offensive to see the curator cleaning. And I was like, well, I've never been so shocked in my life, because I'm not gonna that's completely ridiculous. And he's like, you're ruining the mystique. You'd be seeing the artist cleaning up. I'm like, this is apologies.
But we do it all the time.
But it's also so interesting because this guy was 65. He goes to lots of shows, so he obviously had really this idea of that the polished veneer of the exhibition is I'm not going to work like that. That's I'm not going to. Also I physically cannot do that. I just felt like that was a anecdote I feel like I needed to share. But it's weird. Who says that? At least I feel like people wouldn't say that now. Or maybe they do.
Maybe they would.
Maybe they would. Maybe I just don't.
Maybe they need a mystery, but then.
Yeah, it's also weird.
I hope this message finds you well.
Are you very, very busy these days, Lara? Is it super busy with, or what? Yeah?
Yeah. I'm on Zoom from morning till I really have to leave my computer, to be with Neil. It's very busy because it's approaching. Yeah, and I have a few small things that I have to kind of finish, and but yeah, I have such. It's time is completely different. I have limited time now, and it's so difficult to understand that still, even after 2 years and a half of having it, that I'm limited in time. So I'm exhausted all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Sleep deprived. So I'm actually also slower. I haven't been able to kind of just get a grip on things,
Yeah.
I'm slower because I don't sleep so much, right? So it takes me double the amount of time to also do things.
Yeah. Oh no.
And it's I'm always catching up. So I can't. It's challenging. I can't. I don't know how else, and it's much more difficult also without family here with Neil.
Yeah.
And this is something we didn't think through very well, I think. Right? I mean, we had the grandparents, the uncles, the aunties.
Yeah.
But I was thinking when at the beginning of the pandemic, how my partner and I really needed to invest more time in our friendships here because we don't have family. This is something to take into account in how could the art world change to better support, carers and parents and this sort of thing, is like, I don't know, investing more time in the family that the family that is the friend or the chosen family, or because like just the pandemic itself, like if you can't leave the house, who do you call? Like for us, well, we didn't have to worry about it so much, but we really were like, who do we call if we can't leave? And and we're like, shit, maybe we really need to be better friends. And that's a problem with working too much, I think.
No, but it's true, definitely true. To also make these support structures. And like the world became so big with this total connectedness, everyone all the time, but at the same time also became extremely small.
Well, I think that also in the art world, it's hard. Like, I don't know if you're very lucky, I think, to have this friendship from the Appel and having that specific group of people. But I do feel for myself that it's sometimes hard to know where does the work relationship end and the friendship begin. And I find sometimes that I assume that once we're working together, therefore we're friends, which often is not the case. And so then I'm left going, oh, I told them so many things, and it's like, but like, that's okay. Work relations a work relationship. Like, knowing when a friendship can begin is so difficult for me.
I think this is a really, really, important question in the art world. And I think that also this is why it's important for me, for example, to work with the same people a lot, because they're my friends. They become through the work, they become your friends, and through being friends, they become part of your work. And so life and work become the same, right? You're developing relationships. It's not, this critique that comes also to the curator, like, you're always working with the same people, with your fans, but because we depend on each other. Yeah. Like it's a you depend on each other. You build a friendship. It's a long project that you work together on. It's, in different iterations. The problem is that the art world is not so
friendly.
Not friendly, but doesn't also build on relationships, right? It's event to event, something to something, always requiring the new, right? Like
totally.
It's so fragmented that our relationships get also fragmented. I think it's important. Yeah, but that said, you then you have cliques and you have groups, and it's about also how you.
Yeah, exactly. It's pros.
Yeah, it's extreme in the specifics, I think, as well, right?
Yeah, I think that when you're able to find that relation, I feel like right now I'm in a really good place in my work because I'm working with. In my outside of Shimmer, like on several exhibitions with artists that I've worked with, like solo exhibitions with artists that I had like done group shows in the past. I'm really like feeling like I'm finally understanding what their work is about, and it's really like we're growing together. And I think this is maybe what you were talking about before, and I really love seeing like, okay, we've done actually 5 exhibitions over the course of however many years, and like what a funny like set of mistakes we made, or like questions that we keep on adding to, or it's really fun. And I don't care if anybody says that I choose the same people, like, because sometimes the artwork, it's not necessarily about a personality. It could be also the practice and the art, what the artwork is doing, It's not just the artist, it's the artwork, which is sometimes forgotten that it's, I don't know if any of that made sense, but it felt very passionate. No, but I mean, I remember somebody, and I've said this to you before, Kris, like, I remember hearing somebody say, like, this woman had become an institutional director, and she was saying that one thing that she really misses from her work as a commercial curator, commercial gallerist, is that she doesn't have the long-term relationships with artists that she had in the gallery, because they and that's accepted to have a stable of artists, and that's also your job, is to sell their work, but also, if it's a good gallery, to really like support their career. Like it's supposed to be a long-term relationship. And that was the first time that I was like, oh, galleries are cool, well, it could be like, if you want to see it in like, if you are approaching it in that way, like it's actually very, I don't know, exciting actually.
No, absolutely, but it depends. Then I think it depends on the economic relationship.
Yeah, of course, exactly.
Yeah, right?
She didn't talk about that.
A cooperative, like artists that are linked with a cooperative is different than like a gallery relationship. It's also the issue that is. It also becomes a transactional relationship, or a relationship that's ruled by, or that's affected by this transaction. So it also, I think, has a lot to do, because I think that the critique comes, for example, from working with the same people, is that you're benefiting them economically, right? It's never said, but I think it's also that you're benefiting them economically, with economic and cultural capital, and then how to, this would be the question of how to navigate this, and then this, I think it makes a difference, right? What kind of, also kind of economic
totally
relationship, or
totally, yeah.
I hope this message finds you well.
But we do have a good question to end. If you weren't a curator, what would you do? It doesn't have to be a serious answer either.
Then a dancer.
Yeah, nice. Beautiful. Nice. Yes.
Not that dancers are not serious. Dancing is extremely serious. Either a dancer or an artist.
Nice. Nice. I like that. Yeah.
A banker.
Banker.
Maybe a banker.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. It's a kind of like a pill thing, no? Because, if you become a banker, you're just completely outside of this world. No, you don't know of this other...
That's true. Like the blue or the red pill in the making.
Yeah, exactly. The blue or the red. Because I'm still, on the red if I'm a dancer or an artist.
Thank you so much, Lara.
Yeah, thank you. It was very nice.
Such a good conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Oh, good. That's good to know.
I hope this message finds you well.
If you would like to know more about Lara's curatorial work and her writing, we recommend reading her piece titled "We Are Still Alive, So Remove Us from Memory, Asynchronicity and the Museum in Resistance," published in Errant Journal. We have linked it in the show notes, along with the book Why Call It Labor, Motherhood and Artwork, in which Lara wrote an intimate diary entry following the first months of the birth of her child.
In the next episode, we interview curator and artist Joey Tang on his practice, where we discuss his definition of slow programming. Also, if you have feedback, we'd love to receive your email at ihopethismessagefindsyouvell@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram at ihopethismessage and find us on SoundCloud under the same handle. Our jingle was done by the band Difficult and sound engineering was done by Nick Thomas.